The story begins in the year 1348, as the horrific specter of the Black Death ravages the magnificent city of Florence. The opening pages are grim and uncompromising. Boccaccio describes a society collapsing under the weight of the plague. Dead bodies litter the streets. Families abandon one another out of fear, and all social and religious laws are completely forgotten. In the midst of this living hell, 7 virtuous young women and 3 noble young men meet by chance in the venerable church of Santa Maria Novella. Realizing that staying in the city means certain death or moral decay, they make a radical decision: to flee Florence and seek sanctuary in a deserted luxury villa in the lush, sunlit hills of Fiesole. At the villa, surrounded by walled gardens, flowing fountains, and fresh air, they establish a temporary utopian society based on order, respect, and beauty. To pass the hot afternoons and keep their minds off the horror they left behind, they agree on a strict routine. Every day, each member of the group must tell a story based on a specific theme chosen by that day's crowned king or queen. This safe haven becomes an oasis of life and storytelling, protected from the apocalyptic reality just a few miles away. The first days of storytelling focus heavily on mocking the hypocrisy of the ruling classes, especially the Catholic Church. One of the earliest and most famous tales tells of Ceparello, a notoriously wicked man, a thief, and a murderer. On his deathbed, he delivers a completely fabricated, hyper-pious confession to a naive friar. He lies so convincingly that after his death, the church declares him a saint, and townspeople begin praying to his relics. Through these witty, sharp narratives, Boccaccio introduces a new Renaissance worldview, a world where human wit, intelligence, and sharp tongues are far more powerful than blind religious dogma. The first part concludes as the sun sets over the Tuscan hills on the second day. The youth are laughing, drinking wine, and dancing, fully embracing the joy of being alive. The grim shadow of the plague has been pushed back by the sheer power of human narrative. But as the crown passes to a new leader for the upcoming days, the rules of the game change. The company prepares to dive into the most scandalous, hilarious, and controversial topic of all: the unpredictable, chaotic nature of human desire and romantic deception. As the days progress under the Tuscan sun, the themes chosen by the group turn toward the hilarious and scandalous world of romantic trickery. In this part of the Decameron, Boccaccio showcases his deep fascination with human ingenuity. The heroes of these stories are not chivalrous knights, but clever wives, quick-witted servants, and adaptable lovers who use their brains to escape impossible situations, fool arrogant husbands, and satisfy their natural desires. The stories treat love not as a holy sin, but as a powerful, joyful, and unstoppable force of nature that connects all human beings. One of the most celebrated and risque tales of this section is the story of Masetto of Lamporecchio. Masetto is a young, robust laborer who pretends to be deaf and mute in order to secure a gardening job at a convent full of young nuns. Believing he cannot speak or tell their secrets, the nuns, one by one, including the Mother Superior, take Masetto to their beds. Masetto plays his part perfectly until he becomes completely exhausted by his duties. He magically recovers his speech, claiming a miracle has occurred, and manages to secure a wealthy retirement. This story perfectly captures Boccaccio's sharp, unapologetic satire of monastic hypocrisy. Another fan-favorite tale involves the foolish Calandrino, a recurring character who becomes the ultimate target for practical jokes. His clever friends convince him that a magical stone called the heliotrope can make him completely invisible. Calandrino fills his pockets with stones and walks through the town, believing no one can see him while his friends throw rocks at him for fun. When he returns home and his wife speaks to him, he believes she has broken the spell and beats her in a fit of rage. The story highlights the Renaissance shift toward valuing sharp intellect over gullibility and foolishness. Act 2 wraps up as the seventh day of storytelling comes to an end. The villa gardens are filled with music and laughter, but the underlying message of these comedies is profound. Survival in a chaotic world requires quick thinking and adaptability. The youth have successfully used humor to distance themselves from the bleakness of the Florence plague. However, as the crown is passed once again, the mood shifts. The company realizes that love is not always a comedy, and they prepare to tell stories of a much darker, tragic nature. As the fourth and fourth plus days unfold, the light-hearted laughter in the villa gardens gives way to a solemn, emotional silence. The theme shifts dramatically to those whose love had an unhappy ending. Boccaccio proves that he is not just a master of comedy, but a profound dramatist who understands the heavy, sometimes fatal price of human passion. In these stories, love is no longer a playful game of deception. It is a grand, elevated force that tests the absolute limits of human nobility and endurance against the cruelty of fate and tyrannical social rules. The most famous and devastating tale of this section is the story of Gismonda and Guiscardo. Gismonda, a noble and fiercely intelligent princess, falls deeply in love with Guiscardo, a man of humble birth but immense inner nobility. They carry out their romance in secret until her possessive father, Prince Tancredi, discovers them. Driven by class pride and jealousy, Tancredi has Guiscardo strangled. In a final, sadistic act, he sends his daughter her lover's heart in a golden cup. Gismonda delivers a magnificent, defiant speech about the equality of all human souls before pouring poison over the heart and drinking it, choosing to join her lover in death rather than live under her father's tyranny. Another hauntingly beautiful narrative is the tale of Lisabetta of Messina. Her wealthy, arrogant brothers murder her secret lover, a poor clerk named Lorenzo, to protect the family's social standing. Lorenzo appears to Lisabetta in a dream, revealing the location of his shallow grave. She secretly exhumes his head, brings it back to her room, and buries it in a large pot of basil, watering the plant daily with her tears. The basil grows incredibly lush, fed by grief, until her suspicious brothers steal the pot away. Lisabetta dies of a broken heart, completely consumed by her tragic devotion. Act 3 concludes with the young storytellers visibly moved, some wiping tears from their eyes under the fading Tuscan twilight. They have explored the darkest corridors of the human heart, showing that love can be as destructive as the plague they are fleeing. Yet even in death, Boccaccio's heroes achieve a magnificent moral victory over their oppressors. As the crown is passed for the final days of their exile, the group decides to lift their spirits once more, preparing for the ultimate theme. Stories of those who performed magnificent, generous, and noble deeds in the name of love and friendship. The final act brings the young Florentines to the 10th and last day of their exile. The mood is triumphant and elevated. The theme chosen for this day is magnanimity, stories of individuals who performed grand, selfless, and incredibly noble deeds. Boccaccio uses this final movement to show the absolute peak of human potential. After exploring hypocrisy, lust, and tragedy, the Decameron culminates in a celebration of loyalty, generosity, and the strength of the human spirit. The youth have successfully reconstructed a moral world out of the ashes of the plague. The final and most famous story of the entire book is the tale of Griselda, a patient and humble peasant girl married to Gualtieri, the Marquis of Saluzzo. To test her loyalty, her husband subjects her to a series of monstrous, sadistic psychological trials. He pretends to murder their children, publicly strips her of her titles, and banishes her back to her father's poor cottage in rags. Through every humiliation, Griselda remains perfectly composed, dignified, and unfailingly loyal. Years later, satisfied with her absolute devotion, Gualtieri reveals that their children are alive and restores her as his marchioness in front of the entire court. While modern audiences often debate the cruelty of the test, Boccaccio's focus is on Griselda's staggering, unbeatable inner strength. With the 100th story completed, the 2-week retreat comes to its natural end. The plague in Florence has begun to slow down, and the social order is slowly rebuilding. The 7 young women and 3 young men gather in the villa's grand hall one last time. They have not been corrupted by their isolation, nor have they surrendered to despair. Through the simple act of sharing stories, they have preserved their sanity, their culture, and their humanity. They pack their belongings, leave the beautiful gardens of Fiesole behind, and walk back down the hills toward Florence. The masterpiece concludes as the group returns to the very church where they first met, Santa Maria Novella. They separate and return to their lives, changed but victorious. Boccaccio's Decameron stands as a monumental defense of life itself. It proves that even when the world is ending and death is at the door, human beings can find salvation in art, humor, and each other. The black banner of the Black Death is pulled down, replaced by the bright, chaotic, and beautiful tapestry of human nature.